where you came from, kid. But I know where you're going. Are you a true horror fan? I don't believe in fairy tales. Were you raised in the 80s?
Are you fooling around again? I'll kill you if this is a joke.
Or do you just like movies that plain old scare the shit out of you?
Please, God.
This is God. Well, prepare yourself.
Hey, Jason.
You're about to witness the thatsclassic.net top horror movie countdown of the 1980s.
Jason, Mother is talking to you.
Let's relive your childhood. Welcome to my nightmare.
Welcome to thatsclassic.net, and today we're counting down our top 10 horror movies of the 1980s. For this list, we'll be giving you our top picks of the decade and what movies you should watch if you're into the horror genre. Which movie is your favorite? Let us know in the comments, subscribe to our page, and click the bell to get notified about our latest videos. This is a warning. There will be spoilers in this video, so turn around now if you haven't seen these iconic 1980s horror films.
Number 10.
Halloween 2. The sequel to the 1978 original Halloween 2 was one of the genre's most iconic figures ever to continue his reign of terror in the fictional small town of Haddonfield. Released on October 30, 1981, Michael Myers and the havoc he caused was uniquely relatable for audiences with an unquenchable thirst for violence and destruction.
I've been trick-or-treated to death tonight. You don't know what death is.
The Masked Killer was presented to audiences originally as a mentally ill patient at a psychiatric hospital tormented by his past, only to escape and adopt the murderous persona that the Halloween franchise centered around. This made the Halloween franchise incredibly relatable, as this was something that could feasibly occur in the real world, and allowed it to resonate with fans exceptionally well. The original would have appeared as though Michael Myers was dead at the end of the first film and the story was concluded. Halloween 2 disproved that theory, however, with Michael's murderous streak picking right up where it left off.
Number 9.
The Shining. Even if you have never seen The Shining, it is quite possibly one of the most recognizable horror films of all time.
Here's Johnny.
Released on May 30th, 1980, and based on a novel written by the king of horror himself, Stephen King. Directed by legendary filmmaker Stanley Kubrick, and starring Jack Nicholson as the caretaker of a hotel in the Rocky Mountains. The hotel has a dark history, however, and rather quickly, it becomes obvious that the situation isn't as peaceful as it may seem. His son begins having visions, and his mental health begins to deteriorate, seemingly as a byproduct of both cabin fever and the hotel's past. From there, havoc ensues as Nicholson's character eventually cracks and attempts to murder his own family in a fit of delirious rage that ultimately costs himself his own life. It is virtually impossible to completely and accurately describe everything that happens in The Shining, given how uniquely outlandish it may sound. But that is also why it's considered one of the best horror films of the 1980s.
Number 8.
Aliens. A sci-fi film as much as it is horror, Aliens was released on July 18, 1986, as the sequel to the original flick, Alien. The sequel picks up where its predecessor left off, with the lone survivor of an attack from an otherworldly creature that destroyed her ship and killed her crew drifting through space several decades later. She is eventually rescued and reunites with her colleagues, but is forced to relive the same nightmare when the same alien creatures from before strike again. What ensues is another fight for survival. But this time, it proves to be much more of a struggle, as the aliens have grown substantially in numbers and strength over time and begin destroying entire colonies one by one. Aliens, as well as the original film, is revered for being a sci-fi just as much as a horror film, and in that redefines both genres by confronting moviegoers with the idea of extraterrestrial life in the most detailed and inventive way to date.
Number 7.
The Thing. The Earth is so incredibly vast that some areas of the planet remain virtually untouched, with their secrets equally well kept. Released on June 25th, 1982, The Thing did a fantastic job in showing moviegoers how scary the unknown can be. Set in Antarctica, a group of scientists are conducting research when they cross paths with a parasitic life form. The parasite has the ability to imitate other life forms. This leaves the researchers stuck as they are unsure of who or what to trust, with the parasite constantly working to deceive them in pursuit of its goal. The emotional toll, coupled with the physical threat, proves to be catastrophic as the group attempts to contain the parasite. Utilizing elements from both science fiction and horror, The Thing is also a psychological thriller, with scientists serving as a prime example of how easily one can lose their minds in a situation like this, making the movie one of the most memorable of the decade.
Number 6.
Hellraiser. If you're at all familiar with Hellraiser, you know how uniquely horrifying the classic film truly is. Released on September 18th, 1987, and set in the country of Morocco, a sadomasochist by the name of Frank Cotton buys a puzzle box that possesses a dark secret. In that moment, Frank loses his life as his body is dismembered and a dark spirit has now established its presence in his home. Through a series of events, however, Cotton is revived in the form of a disfigured corpse with the intent of reclaiming his life. This isn't a painless process, however, with Frank implicating his sister-in-law, Julia, who moved into Frank's home with his brother following his death and previously had a secret affair with Frank. He does this in order to drain the life out of them and reclaim it as his own, and claims that doing so will allow him to open a portal to something akin to a utopia, which he promises to bring Julia to as well. Their evil deeds are uncovered by Frank's niece, who is greeted by a man known as Pinhead, a shadowy figure with pale skin and hundreds of pins stemming from his skull. He explains to her that his kind are simply explorers and are neither good or evil. He agrees to help her stop Frank, however, and ultimately capture him to return him back to their world. This is the work of esteemed author and filmmaker Clive Barker.
Number 5.
Poltergeist. Released on June 4th, 1982, Poltergeist is a film centered around the life of an upper-middle-class family living in California. Despite how perfect life may seem for the family, things begin to change pretty quickly. Things begin to get more sinister, with the daughter seemingly disappearing off of the face of the earth, only to be heard by her family through the television. With the help of a specialist, they discover their home is being plagued by malevolent spirits and also houses a portal to the world these spirits come from, which their daughter had unexpectedly fallen into. This forces the family to contend with the spirits and enter the portal willingly in hopes of saving their daughter and reclaiming their lives. While their efforts are successful, it becomes obvious the home is uninhabitable when they realize it is built on top of an old graveyard and they barely escape with their lives.
You son of a bitch, you moved the cemetery, but you left the bodies, didn't you?
Supernatural, to say the least. The dynamic duo of Tobe Hooper and Steven Spielberg certainly delivered a memorable film in Poltergeist.
Number 4.
Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th was similar to the Halloween franchise in that the concept behind it was very relatable, but in a very different setting that would change how moviegoers viewed the idea of summer camp forever. Released on May 9th, 1980, Friday the 13th centered around a summer camp better known as Camp Crystal Lake that seemingly fit the mold of any stereotypical summer camp, but has a dark history highlighted by a young boy drowning 2 decades prior. The camp continues to operate, and Friday the 13th starts off with the camp's current counselors preparing the site for the next group of campers they are set to watch for the summer. The counselors begin getting killed off while their campsite is seemingly being sabotaged, but in a mysterious fashion that forces them to remain vigilant at all costs. It would turn out that the source of all the mayhem was something no one could have expected. The mother of the young boy who had drowned had decided to seek revenge for the accident that claimed her son's life. And it turns out that he didn't actually die. This would be the first time horror heads would be introduced to one of horror's most iconic characters to date, Jason Voorhees, and would set the stage for one of the genre's most successful franchises ever.
Number 3. Child's
Play. Though the title might make moviegoers think they are going in to see a lighthearted family affair, Child's Play, released on November 9th, 1988, is a great example of why you should never judge a book by its cover. The brainchild of Don Mancini, Child's Play introduced us to quite possibly the most unique monster of any of the films in this list in the form of a toy doll named Chucky. What was originally thought to be a loving mother fulfilling her son's wishes would end up becoming their worst nightmare. The doll the son so desperately wanted wasn't just an ordinary doll. It was possessed by the spirit of a deceased criminal named Charles Lee Ray, who is seeking vengeance now that he has been reborn. Despite appearing to be nothing more than a toy, Chucky had a mind of his own and was relentless in his pursuit of vengeance, which left many dead in its path.
So long, John.
Child's Play would end up permeating pop culture to such a great degree that retailers began selling real Chucky dolls that fans could purchase, essentially bringing the horror right into their homes and establishing the project as one of the best horror films of its time.
Number 2.
Pet Sematary. The second film on this list, based upon the work of Stephen King, Pet Sematary, released on April 21st, 1989, is one of the best examples of the author's inventive mind. The story begins with a family making the move from Chicago to Maine after the father gets a new job, and with it, a new home. Shortly after arriving, they soon discover the situation is a little stranger than it originally appeared when their own cat dies and a neighbor takes them beyond the pet cemetery to the real cemetery, believed to originally belong to the indigenous people of the area, and helps them bury their pet. The next day, the cat miraculously returns home, but it is abundantly obvious that something isn't right with the animal. And the same neighbor confirms their suspicions that the cat has been resurrected through the cemetery's supernatural power. This wouldn't be their last trip to the cemetery, however. When their toddler son is killed by a speeding truck a few months later, the father gets the idea to bury his son there as well, hoping for the same fate. Though his neighbor attempts to dissuade him from doing so, the grief is too overwhelming to bear.
Well, sometimes that is better.
And he follows through with it, only for his son to return with his spirit replaced by pure evil. The now demonic child ends up killing his mother and the neighbor before the father is forced to kill him, ending his own son's life for a second time. The theme of mortality is integral to the plot of Pet Sematary.
Number 1.
A Nightmare on Elm Street. Whether you're a fan or not, virtually everybody is familiar with Wes Craven's classic, A Nightmare on Elm Street, released on November 16th, 1984. Centered around a group of teenagers who are being tormented by a creepy character that can invade their dreams. A Nightmare on Elm Street came during arguably the most iconic time period in the history of the horror genre and would continue to permeate pop culture to this day. Craven also created one of the most iconic villains ever in crafting the film, which would end up evolving into one of Hollywood's most successful horror franchises ever in the aforementioned supernatural creature, better known as the infamous Freddy Krueger.
Help me, please. Save me from
Freddy.
His jarring appearance with his body covered in burns and razor-sharp claws, coupled with a uniquely inventive way of tormenting unsuspecting individuals, would end up becoming a recipe for success and makes A Nightmare on Elm Street one of the 10 best horror movies of the 1980s.
I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy.
We hope you enjoyed our top 10 horror movies of the 1980s. Which one caught your interest the most? Tell us what you think in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Click the bell to get notified about our latest videos and share with a friend. Make sure you visit thatsclassic.net, and thank you for watching.